If you tried to do this on an Intel MacBook, you'd get not even a quarter of a frame per second. I can't believe it. We're actually pulling off a locked 30 at Ray Tracing Ultra. Alright, so here we are in CYBERPUNK 2077. But this time we are using an M3 Max MacBook Pro. That is the 16-core CPU, 40-core GPU, maxed out M3 Max. We have the Metal Performance HUD in the upper right, and we are going to go through the same presets as we did on the M4 Mac Mini, but on the M3 Max MacBook Pro this time. So let's go to Settings, let's go to Graphics, and we are going to start with the For This Mac preset. I'm noticing a difference already with the M3 Max. It's targeting 60 FPS, whereas with the M4 Mini, it was targeting 30 FPS. Okay, VSync is set to 60. The resolution is 1920 by 1080. Let's run the first benchmark and see what we get. I'm really interested to see the results here. Here we go, the first benchmark starting up, and we will also have the in-game FPS counter to compare to the Metal Performance HUD as well. But ooh, baby, immediately locked at 60 FPS, whereas on the M4 Mini it was locked at 30. With the M4 chip base model, you get 10 GPU cores. The M3 Max non-binned, fully maxed out, you get 40 GPU cores. So this has 30 more GPU cores compared to the M4. Completely smooth here. This is great. Now I'm curious because this is the first test and we did not drop below 60. This is fantastic. Okay, for the first test for the For This Mac preset, we had an average FPS of 59.95 with a minimum of 58.94 and a max of 61.13. Resolution 1920 by 1080. VSync on, and as you see here, we have MacBook Pro 16-inch, Apple M3 Max, 16-core CPU, 40-core GPU, 48 gigabytes of unified memory, whereas my base model M4 Mac Mini only has 16 gigabytes of unified memory. So a big step up in terms of hardware here. We are now on the low preset with VSync off, resolution set to 1920 by 1080. Let's see what kind of FPS we get here. Okay, I can already see in the upper right we are at 120 right now. So this is the low preset with uncapped frame rate. Right now we are over 120 FPS. Okay, okay, we're going up and down, up and down. Wow, I just saw it hit 140 FPS. Going outdoors here, we are at a locked 120. The Metal Performance HUD and the in-game FPS counter are conflicting a little bit. Personally, I would pay more attention to the Metal Performance HUD. Wow, this is incredible. Okay, so for the low preset at 1080p with VSync off, uncapped frame rate, we had an average FPS of 115.98, minimum FPS of 62.15, and a max FPS of 262.68. That is insane. Okay, next test, we're going to switch it to the medium preset. And then go to video and let's leave VSync off like we did in the low, because we know it's going to hit 60 FPS with 40 GPU cores. Once again, resolution set to 1920 by 1080. VSync is off, uncapped frame rate. Let's run the benchmark. Alright, so this is the medium preset, 1080p, uncapped frame rate on the M3 Max. Right now, indoors, we're between 120 and 130. We just hit 150. Wow, this is incredible. A little bit of jaggedness, jitteriness going on here. But that frame rate, man, that is incredible. An Apple Silicon laptop running CYBERPUNK 2077. One of the most, if not the most demanding games you can play on a computer at 120 FPS like it's nothing. These Apple Silicon chips are crazy, man. Alright, so for the medium preset, we had an average FPS of 109.30 with a minimum FPS of 58.9 and a max FPS of 259.48. 1920 by 1080, VSync off, uncapped frame rate. Let's go to the next preset, which I believe is going to be high. Yep, high. With the high preset, it changes Metal FX to quality mode, but we're going to leave everything else the same. VSync off, uncapped frame rate, resolution 1920 by 1080. This is the high preset, uncapped frame rate at 1080p. Our FPS is considerably lower than it was before, but it does look a hell of a lot better. So it's a trade-off, you know, either smoothness or fidelity. What do you want? You pick your poison, you know? We're still above 100 FPS on a 16-inch laptop, which is just insane. Okay, outdoors we're in the 140s. You could easily play this at a locked 60 to 90 FPS. Easily on the M3 Max. Okay, so on the high preset, we had an average of 99.61 FPS with a minimum of 55.87 and a max of 243.65. Once again, that's at 1080p with VSync off, uncapped frame rate. Let's go to the next preset. Okay, we are now at the Ultra preset. VSync off, uncapped frame rate once again. Resolution 1920 by 1080. Here we go with the Ultra preset. Okay, our FPS is much lower than it was before. Look at the difference between the in-game and the Metal Performance HUD. The Metal Performance HUD is saying 95, and the in-game FPS counter is saying 80 to 100. Definitely starting to stutter a lot. Not nearly as smooth of an experience as it was before, but it does look really nice. Alright, the test is wrapping up here. Let's see what our FPS numbers are. Alright, on the Ultra preset at 1920 by 1080 uncapped frame rate, we were able to achieve 85.83 average FPS with a minimum FPS of 58.99 and a max FPS of 246.37. On to the next preset we go. Alright, here's our first ray tracing preset. Ray tracing low. VSync is off. And we're at 1920 by 1080. Once again, run the benchmark. This one is going to be interesting because this one introduces ray tracing into the mix, which I don't really see the value in, to be honest with you. I mean, it does look pretty, but the performance hit it takes, kind of takes away from how good it looks. Okay, we have now dropped into the high 60s on the ray tracing low preset. Man, if you could run this at ray tracing low at a locked 60, that would blow my mind. We're going to try that at the end of the video. We're going to try that because, man, that would be awesome. Alright, wrapping up with the ray tracing low preset, we had an average FPS of 77 frames per second with a minimum of 53.65 and a max of 230.43. Once again, this is at 1080p with VSync off. Alright, let's go to the next ray tracing preset. We are now on ray tracing medium preset, resolution 1920 by 1080, VSync off. You get the drill at this point. I have a feeling this one's going to be the first one that's unable to achieve 60 FPS. Yep, we are starting out in the high 40s for the ray tracing medium. Very respectable, to be honest with you, especially when you consider it is a MacBook. Never thought the day would happen where I could play CYBERPUNK on an Apple laptop. Okay, we've hit 60 outdoors. Insane performance compared to the base model M4. This is honestly blowing my mind. Alright, the benchmark is wrapping up here, and on the ray tracing medium preset, we had an average of 52.15 frames per second with a minimum of 29.18 and a max of 81. Resolution 1920 by 1080. VSync off. Move to the next preset, ray tracing ultra. Once again, VSync off. 1920 by 1080. This one I'm guessing we're going to be at or below 30 FPS. Let's see if I am correct. We are at 36 FPS. So this could mean possibly, we're going to try this at the end of the video as well. Possibly you could run ray tracing ultra, lock the frame rate at 30 and call it a day. We're going to test this at the end of the video because I'm really curious. As we go outdoors, our FPS did manage to hit the mid 40s, but now it's dropping back to the low 40s. Incredible. 30 FPS Ray Tracing Ultra preset. This is insane, guys. All on an M3 Max inside a 16-inch laptop. I can't believe it. Okay, so here we are with the Ray Tracing Ultra preset on this M3 Max MacBook Pro. We were able to achieve an average FPS of 39.31, minimum FPS of 26.51, and a max FPS of 80.27. I believe our final preset is the Ray Tracing Overdrive preset. Once again, VSync off, 1920 by 1080. Okay, we have dropped below 30. We are now in the low 20s. But compared to the M4 Mac Mini, I remember doing this test because I just recorded the video last night. The M4 Mac Mini was able to only reach 5 frames per second at this part, whereas on this M3 Max we are at 22 frames per second. So that's almost 6 times the frame rate on the M3 Max versus the M4. I thought the results on the M4 were crazy, but this is just taking it to a whole nother level. I'll tell you what, this is where I'm going to be playing the game. I mean, the frame rates you're able to achieve with a Max chip are so much higher at higher quality settings, obviously. Alright, so for Ray Tracing Overdrive, we were able to achieve a very respectable average FPS of 23.85 with a minimum of 17.2 and a max of 35.1. Alright, so just for fun, we're going to go back to the Ray Tracing Low preset, and we have the frame rate capped at 60, once again with the resolution set to 1920 by 1080. I want to see if we can get a locked, or at least very close to locked, 60 FPS on Ray Tracing Low at 1080p. Let's see, ladies and gentlemen, what do you guys think? Alright, yeah, so far locked 60. Wow. This is shocking. Once again, guys, this is Ray Tracing Low on Apple Silicon at 1080p with a locked 60 frames per second. I can't believe those words just came out of my mouth. Wow. It just shows you how far along these Apple Silicon chips have come, considering they can now run this game even at ray tracing settings at 60 FPS. This is insane. Alright, so yes, we did indeed get a locked 60 FPS on the Ray Tracing Low preset at 1080p. We had an average FPS of 59.95, minimum FPS of 58.87, and a max FPS of 61.14. Insane. We are now going to do Ray Tracing Ultra, but this time lock it at 30 FPS at 1080p and see if we can pull that off. Okay, this is Ray Tracing Ultra locked at 30 FPS on this M3 Max MacBook Pro. So far, yep, we're at a locked 30. This really shows you how powerful these higher end Apple Silicon chips are. If you tried to do this on an Intel MacBook, you'd get not even a quarter of a frame per second. I can't believe it. We're actually pulling off a locked 30 at Ray Tracing Ultra. We managed to pull it off. Here we go with the Ray Tracing Ultra preset at 1920 by 1080 with VSync set to 30 FPS. We were able to get an average FPS of 29.98, a minimum FPS of 29.66, and a max FPS of 30.32. So Ray Tracing Low, you can do a locked 60 FPS. Ray Tracing Ultra, you can do a locked 30 FPS on an M3 Max MacBook Pro. I have no words anymore, guys. I'm done. This has been benchmarking CYBERPUNK 2077 on this M3 Max 16-inch MacBook Pro. Once again, 40-core GPU, 16-core CPU, 48 gigabytes unified memory, 1 terabyte of storage. We managed to hit over 100 FPS on low settings, but not only that, we managed to get a locked 60 FPS on Ray Tracing Low and a locked 30 FPS on Ray Tracing Ultra. These Apple Silicon chips are in a league of their own when it comes to their performance and their power efficiency. This blew the M4 Mac Mini I tested yesterday absolutely out of the water. mop the floor with it. Honestly, this is the first time since I bought this M3 Max MacBook Pro that I've actually been able to see the value of having a Max chip. So yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, like, comment, and subscribe for more videos like this in the future. And you guys can tap the card on screen to watch the same video but with the M4 base model instead of the M3 Max. I hope you guys enjoyed. I'll see you guys later.